Hey, how's it going? Family farmhouse here. We wanted to do another vlog kind of in our adoption or foster care series of vlogs about the little girl that we're gonna adopt in November, Kady. So God led us into foster care, and so while we were going through the foster care training that you have to do to get certified, a friend of ours from a church that we used to attend had told us about this little girl that needed an adoptive home. She was in foster care already, but the home she was in, they didn't want to adopt her. They were about to have a baby, so they were just needing room. And so this friend of ours had adopted Kady's little brother, and so older brother. I'm sorry, that's right, older brother. And she told us about Kady. They had asked if she wanted Kady, and they just, their kids are older now. They weren't in a period of life where they wanted a 3-year-old at the time, or two-year-old. Man, it's been so long. So anyway, she told us about her. We were excited. We felt, even without meeting her, just God already working on our hearts and knitting our hearts to her. It was crazy. And so we told our agency about her, and they expedited us or sped up our training so we could get certified in time to get this little girl, because there was a deadline. This family was going to have their baby, and they wanted her moved by, we only had a few months, I think. And so we got certified, and we were ready to go, and then it was like a hurry up and wait type thing, which it's that a lot in foster care. So we hurried up, we got everything done, and now we were just waiting. I think it took about 2 months until we finally actually had her in our home. And then in between getting certified and getting her, we'd gotten a call about another placement, twin little boys who we took into our home. And so we had these twin boys, and then we got the call that they were ready to move her, and they wanted to start. You have to do a meet and greet type thing, and so we did that at our friend's home. We met Kady and we played with her, and the caseworkers were there. They just want to see, is there a connection? How are they with kids? How are they with her? How is she with them? And that went well. That went really good. We fell in love with her. And so we were moving forward with bringing her into our home, but then we realized we didn't have a big enough car for 6 kids. And so we didn't know what to do. We didn't want to say no, and then we didn't want to send the twins back, so we just prayed and asked God, what should we do? How are we going to handle this? And we felt He was leading us to get a bigger car, which would kind of lead us into debt. We didn't want to go into debt, but we felt, if we're going into debt to be on mission, then if that's where God was leading us, then we would do that. We did some research on the internet and looked around and thought, hey, let's, Lindsay wanted a van that had enough room. She wouldn't have to crawl over seats.
Because we would have 6 in car seats.
Yeah, they would all be in car seats, and she didn't want to have to crawl over seats to buckle kids in. And so we did research, and we ended up getting a 12-passenger Nissan Envy. And the first and only brand new car we've ever owned was a 12-passenger van. So we picked up this van, we went and got the twins, and then we started the visits with Kady. Before she could be in our home, we had to do just some, 2-hour visit with her, a 3-hour visit with her in our home, and then an overnight visit. And the family that had her lived about an hour away from us, and so we tried to pick a central meeting place. So the place we ended up meeting was like this little, cutout parking area on the side of the highway in between where we lived. So we met them there a couple of times. We swapped, did the exchange, and then we drove her home, and everything went great. We just fell in love with her, and she's really good at those, initial meetings. She loves those. And so then it was time. We went down and picked up Kady from their home and her little plastic bag of stuff that she had, and we brought her home. And we had her here for 3 months. And the first month and a half, it's like a honeymoon period. So she's great. You're like, man, this kid is great. What's the problem? But any longer than that, and she's not used to being places for that long. So she starts to she wants to move on at that point. So she starts attaching to other people, wanting to go home with them. And so that was just starting about the, last few weeks that we had her, maybe the last month. And then Lindsay got a phone call she had a new caseworker. Lindsay got a phone call from this caseworker that, was devastating. But
Yeah. Yeah, so she called and said, we found some family that wants to take Kady. At this point, they had been looking for kin for about a year and hadn't found anybody. And now they had, and this was an adult cousin of Kady's who wanted to take her and raise her. And Kady had never met her. She was a single mom, and it just, in our eyes, it seemed like this doesn't seem like the best thing for Kady, but we had no choice in it. And so it was devastating to, we thought she was ours. We were told that she was moved to our house so we could adopt her. And so it was just really heartbreaking to be losing her and to have no choice in the matter. It was really, really difficult for Kennedy, who was so close to her. And I'll just never forget the night that we had to tell Kennedy that Kady was leaving.
Horrible.
Kennedy was 6 at the time, so she was just a little girl, and it was so heartbreaking for her to lose this sister that she had finally gotten. And as time went on, Kennedy started to get angry with us, and we felt like there was a spiritual battle there, that Satan was trying to drive a wedge between her and us, and we didn't know how to navigate any of it. We just kept praying with her and for her and telling her to cling to Jesus like we were, and thankfully God was so faithful and just healed her heart and our hearts. And so around this time of Kady transitioning out of our home, she was becoming less and less attached to us and just having a lot more of these episodes where she would withdraw from us. And so I think to cope with what was going on, it wasn't the greatest way to deal with it, but we just kind of focused on how she is so hard, she's so traumatized, and she's the hardest of the foster kids we've had, and so we kind of focused on that to help us cope with the change. So she left in June, at 3 months after we had her, and that was it. I mean, we got other placements in the meantime, but that's a different story. And we just moved on with our life, but we did not keep contact. We had the option to keep contact with her cousin, and unfortunately it was just too painful. And again, we didn't know how to navigate that. There's no rules. There's nobody telling you this is what will help your kids the most, or this is what will hurt them the most. There was nothing like that. And we just felt, obviously we prayed about it a lot, and we felt like it would be harder on everybody to keep in contact.
We had kind of moved on. We had come to the, just in our minds, we're not going to ever see her again. She's with family. It's better for her. So that's kind of what we had to do. Like Lindsay was saying, it was just too hard to try to think about, the kids even after, 6 months would still ask sometimes, hey, can we go meet Kady at a park, or, but also at that time we'd had some other placements, and so that helped them kind of move on from her, and our house was so crazy that it helped us move on from her. We couldn't think about her because we had so much other stuff going on. But then...
So 7 months after she left, we had 7 kids in our house. We still had the twin boys. they had turned 3, and we had another placement, a 4-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy, brother and sister. So we had 7 kids, 7 and under now. And I had a dream, seems so weird to talk about, but I did, about Kady. And I had never dreamt about her before. I really had genuinely moved on. Anyways, I just had this dream that I got to see her and hug her, and the caseworker asked me if we wanted her, and all I had to do was say yes, and she was ours. And that was the end of the dream. And I woke up in the morning just feeling like so heavy, like just, like I really do miss her so much, like that kind of a feeling, and thinking maybe today I should reach out to her caseworker and just ask how she is. So that was what I thought when I first woke up, but then the day took over and I just kind of moved on, and I didn't email her caseworker. So a few hours later, I was sitting actually right here on this couch. I had our wonderful friend who was over helping us clean for that crazy year and a half. She was here. The kids were all running around, and I was sitting here folding laundry. And I got a call on my phone, and I looked down, and it was, I knew the area code was the county that she would be calling from. I don't know how to describe it, but I looked down, and it's a number that I don't have in my phone. But just by looking at the area code, which is a very common area, it's our area code too. I don't know, I guess that's irrelevant, but I just looked down and I knew she was calling me. This caseworker who I hadn't talked to in 7 months, I just knew she was calling me, and I was like frozen. I didn't answer it. And I knew then that she was leaving me a message. And so I got, it said I got a message, and so I went into our room and listened to it. So I went into our room where it was a little quieter and listened to her message. And she said, "Hi, this is so-and-so from such and such county, Department of Human Services. I don't know if you remember me, but I need to talk to you about Kady." Well, she gave Kady's birth name. And I was shaking, I was crying, I was just praising the Lord, because even though she didn't say Kady needs a new home, I knew it. Like God had already told me in this bizarre dream that that's what was happening, and I just knew it. So I called her back, and she said, do you remember me? And I'm calling about Kady, and she's in a situation where she needs a permanent home. And again, I just was like crying. I couldn't even talk to her. I just kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," because that's all I could get out. And eventually I calmed down and I said, "I knew you were going to call. I had this dream last night and I knew you were going to call." And I don't know if she's a Christian or what her faith is, but she said, "Oh, I have goosebumps. I just can't believe this." And I said, yes, we want her, yes. And she said, "Oh, you've just made my day." And I was saying how glad I was that she called us, because all the time when kids get in these situations, the previous foster home isn't called. Yeah. So that was so amazing. And I hung up with her and I called you at work.
I was at work.
How was that for you?
It was just crazy. Like I was at work and in court, and she called, and I stepped out, and she told me all that, and it took a minute for my mind to like wrap around what she was saying, like, and then I just was like, wow, I was excited, but also like, oh man, we're gonna have 8 kids, so excited, but also like, oh wow, it's gonna be a lot, but I couldn't wait to get her back and to have her here and to just be loving her again. We just loved her, and she was our daughter, and that's really what it felt like. Like, oh man, our kid is coming back home.
That's totally what it felt like. And so we actually didn't get her for another 6 weeks, maybe. We had a lot of hiccups in the road. over those 6
Yeah.
weeks, our agency said, no, you can't have her. You have too many foster kids. We had to get an appeal from the state. We had to have all these people write letters for vouching that we could do it.
The crazy thing about that, and this is how it's weird, is so we got the 4-year-old little girl and the 2-year-old little boy, and then they called us about Kady, which would make it 8 kids, which, they said you can't do that. But if we had already had Kady here, and then they called us about the 4-year-old and the 2-year-old, we could have taken them because they were siblings, so the system would have looked at that as one placement as opposed to 2. But since we already had them here, and then they called about Kady, they looked at it as, well, that's your 8th placement. Whereas if it was switched around, they would have looked at it as our 7th placement, or
Yeah.
not 7th placement, but strange how it worked out. It worked out like that.
So getting that waiver from the state to have this additional child was a huge hurdle. And in the midst of that hurdle, the caseworker said to Kady's cousin, can you hang on just a little bit? They do want her, but it's going to take a little while. They have to get a waiver from the state because they have so many children in their home. And then her cousin said, well, if she can do it with that many kids in her home, then I can do it. I want to keep her. So we finally get our waiver, and now her cousin wants to keep her. But thank the Lord for giving me that weird dream. I mean, it's not weird because it's from him, but it felt weird because I just never felt like we were really in any danger of losing her. I just felt like her cousin loved her and wanted to do the right thing. She didn't want to give up on her too easily, and so she needed to walk that out in her own way and make sure that she really did need to let go of Kady. So we were just in a waiting period. I think then it was like another 2 or 3 weeks after we got the waiver that her cousin was holding on and having additional meetings and talking about additional supports and resources. And then on a Friday, I just got a call from the caseworker, and she said she had Kady and she was on her way to our house. It just was like that her cousin just dropped her off at daycare and said, and called the caseworker and said, I just can't.
Yeah, so the caseworker, her cousin dropped her off. And this is, how hard looking at it this way, how hard, crazy it is for Kady. So Kady got dropped off by her cousin at daycare, not knowing anything was going on, not knowing she wasn't ever going to go back to that house. She gets picked up when daycare's over by the caseworker with her stuff, doesn't have a goodbye with her cousin, doesn't see her cousin again. So gets picked up by the caseworker and then brought to our house. And her first day back here was hard.
It was rough.
She didn't want to be here.
She was so scared. And we had 2 more kids who she had never met, but at the time she was being traumatized again, and I think because of that she didn't remember any of us. We really thought she would remember us, but she didn't. I mean, she genuinely didn't remember us. She was like physically pushing Dan away. She was clinging to the caseworker, screaming, and this went on for maybe an hour or 2, but it's Friday night at this point, and the caseworker needed to go. And I said, do you want me to just pull her off of you and you can leave? And so that's what we ended up doing.
So we did that, and then Lindsay took Kady in our TV room with the other kids, and we just turned on, I think at the time she really liked Rapunzel, so we just turned that on to try to calm her down. And it still took probably maybe not a week, but close to a week for her to even talk to me or look at me. I mean, it was crazy how
It was.
traumatized she was when she came back here. We didn't expect that at all, and I don't think the caseworker did
Yeah,
either. So
nobody
that was
did.
crazy.
It wasn't very like reassuring that
Yeah.
this was gonna go well. But it's weird because it's like the memories were there once she could calm down and feel safe.
Yeah.
And she grieved for a long time about her cousin. She
Yeah.
was very happy there. Whether it was a great home or not, I don't know, but she was happy
Yeah.
there, and that was her family, and she really grieved them. But gradually the memories did come back, and I think now she does genuinely remember that she
Yeah.
used to live here. It was just very traumatizing. The other neat thing is there's so much turnover with caseworkers, and
Yeah.
this was just such a God thing that when Kady left us, there was the caseworker who made that decision had somebody studying under her. So Karen knew us and knew Kady, but she was learning under the caseworker.
Yeah.
So Kady left, the caseworker left, and Karen was still there. And she finished her training, became Kady's caseworker. And then Karen was the one who called me. Karen was the one who brought Kady to our home
Yeah.
on that Friday, and I think it was that Monday she left.
Yeah. So she was leaving, and that was like the last thing she did.
Yeah, so it was amazing that God made it so the person who knew us and knew Kady was still there that whole time, like just from the very beginning of her career to the very end of her career with this agency. There just was so many amazing ways that God carried us through all of that and taught us to not be afraid, to not fear what I guess the system said was impossible or couldn't happen or it wasn't going to work out, or what our fears told us that this was too many kids and it was too overwhelming and too hard. And I'm just so thankful, especially for Dan, that he has such a clear vision of what God tells us, just to walk in obedience and to not be fearful, and him telling me that day after day. And I'm just so thankful that we are where we are and that we have our adoption date, and we're just really, really thankful. So that's our story of how we got Kady twice and what God has done in our lives with her. Thanks for watching.